So welcome to this week's Alzheimer's Health Clinic Facebook Live. And this week I am happy to not be doing a live interview. Thank you so much everyone for the positive feedback on the session last week with Emma. And once we managed to get things technically working, it seemed to be that it was a really helpful interview. So I think we're going to do more to play with that format in the future. One of the things that's been suggested is bringing back the original format of recovery stories that I used to do as part of Secrets to Recovery, and looking to do some of those as a kind of interview format like I did with Emma, but specifically focused on people's recovery stories. So we're going to start to put together some planning and scheduling around that, and hopefully that will be useful in the coming months. And also we'll give some variety from me just kind of talking directly in these kinds of videos. This week I wanted to talk a little bit about how to listen to your body. This is something that a few people have emailed in as a question to get into a bit more of the specifics. Before I do that, just a couple of announcements. We, and when I say we, I mean myself and the many of the practitioner team and the admin team at the Optimum Health Clinic are doing a fundraising event on Monday. We are doing Go Ape, which is a high ropes course in the one we're doing is in Alexandra Park in London. And we're doing it as a fundraiser for the Optimum Health Clinic, which, as you may know, is a registered charity. So we'll post the link, or I'll post the link to one of the team can post a link to this to the kind of the fundraising page. If you want to get behind us, we would appreciate it. We will. Perhaps we should say that if we hit the fundraising target, only then will we share the humiliating photos and videos. Go Ape, for those who don't know, is basically a high ropes course. It's, I guess, some of a physical challenge, but also I think more a psychological challenge because you're high up in trees, kind of doing climbing and I don't know how to describe it, but doing physically and psychologically challenging things, I believe. So if you'd like to see photos and videos, get behind us, and we'll share some of the humiliating footage that comes out of that. And just a few words to those that you don't know in terms of the importance of the research that we're doing. Our long-term vision is that we believe that the Optimum Health Clinic approach should be freely available to anyone that is in need of it. And for that to happen, we need government funding for treatment, i.e. NHS funding for treatment. To get NHS funding for treatment, we have to meet the required evidence base, which is necessary to satisfy NICE guidelines and various other things. We are, in the coming week or two, submitting the ethics application, NHS ethics application for the randomized controlled trial that we're doing in a number of stages, the first stage being a feasibility study. That has been, I'm not exaggerating, years of work to put together the documentation and the paperwork behind all of the different pieces of the OHC approach, psychology side, nutrition side, all of the tests, the supplements, interventions that we use to do that in a way which we and the University of Surrey that we're working with are confident will satisfy an NHS ethics committee. That alone has been a huge piece of work. So at this point, any fundraising that we raise is very directly going to be going towards the intervention stage, which is actually people that are coming into that study, paying for them to effectively receive the OHC approach. But I know the question that often comes up at this point is people say, well, how do I get to have access to that treatment? For us to meet NHS ethics, it has to be randomized and it has to come through specific NHS PIC sites. And we can't recommend people in any way, shape or form, because obviously if we were, that could bias the study. So unfortunately, you can't contact us and say, I would like to be in the study. That's just, I'm afraid, the way it is. But the long-term vision is very much that we want to make this freely available. And any sponsorship we get for us risking life and limb by hanging from trees on Monday will be directly supporting that. Also, as a sign of the work that we do, some of you may be aware, we published a cost of illness study last year, which looked at the macroeconomic cost, the cost of the UK economy of MECFS a year, which was a staggering £3.3 billion a year that this illness costs the UK government in lost tax revenue, paying for benefits, treatment, such things. And that got quoted in a debate in Westminster Hall with MPs last week. So we are, I think, doing some pretty important work, both in terms of raising the profile of the importance of wider investment, but also the work that we ourselves are doing. So anything you can do to support us would be hugely appreciated. Like many ambitious charities, we're always short of the resources we need to really do what we want to do. And so anything you can do makes a huge difference. That said, let's go back to the focus of the video. So how to listen to your body. This is pretty easy to describe how to do and phenomenally difficult to do when you're first doing it. So I want to say that up front for those of you which have been working with this for a while and struggle with learning to listen to your body, that think you're the only one that finds it difficult. You're not. It is, it's tricky for a lot of reasons, some of which we'll briefly come into. So the first thing you have to recognize is that you are effectively learning a new language. So it's, you go to a foreign country, say you go to China or Japan or something, or Russia, you want to watch the football in Russia, and you don't speak that language, it's a big uphill, especially if you're not naturally experiencing language, it's a big uphill path to learn, to understand, and to be able to communicate and speak in a new language. And if you're used to meeting the world very much through your mind, and you're having to learn to listen to your heart and your emotions and your body and what it's communicating, you, just like anyone learning a new language, it sounds like gobbledygook. It's almost impossible to interpret it or make sense of it. And having 3 children, of which the youngest is just starting to use words at the moment, having seen 2 previous children go through that process, a child first manages to say bye-bye, which is what our youngest is doing at the moment. It's like everyone celebrates, right? It's like that's an amazing accomplishment. And so when you're learning the language of listening to your body, if really just as a starting point, one time you can recognize that you are going into a crash a little bit sooner than you normally would, and you can preempt it, even if you still end up in a period where you're not feeling great for a while and you have a mini crash and you might feel like, quote unquote, you failed. That's the equivalent of that child saying bye-bye or hello, whatever it is, for the first time. It's still a significant piece of progress. And it's like at the start of the journey of learning to listen to our body, comparing ourselves to someone that's kind of learnt that language and cracked it is like going to a foreign country and expecting to speak the language on the first day. It's not a reasonable expectation, and actually it invites self-judgment and criticism, feeling like we can't do it and we're failing and everything else. And obviously that's not constructive and that's not useful. The next thing is that we're learning, the trick is in the title. You're learning to listen to your body. You're not learning necessarily, or that could be a separate piece of work, you're not learning to talk at your body. So what can happen is that we think when we're learning to listen to our body, what we should be doing is getting our body to respond the way that we want it to respond. We want to change feelings and symptoms. And because we're not succeeding at doing that, we think we're failing. And actually, it's about listening. And if we're so used to telling ourselves what we should be doing, shouldn't be doing, how we should be feeling, shouldn't be feeling, it's actually quite a step to learn to listen and to hear what's there rather than to talk at. Often also, when we talk about learning to listen to your body, it's not just one communication that you're listening to. It's a little bit like listening to, it's almost like listening to a committee of people, each speaking a different language and trying to decipher what the communication is. So it's almost like your emotions are talking in French and your muscle aches are talking in German, and your overwired nervous system is speaking in Japanese. And it's like you've got all these different communications, these different languages that you're trying to decipher and understand. And you listen to one, and actually what that one wants is in contradiction to what the other ones want or need. So you have to learn to kind of decipher these different communications, these different pieces that are going on. And this is where the OHC map becomes so, I think, so crucial and so important. That if you can map things like stages of recovery, you can recognize, actually, I can see what's happening as I'm at stage 1 to stage 2 and the things that go with this or that, and that. If you can recognize you have maladaptive stress response, or you can see there's an achiever subtype, or you can see that your adrenal system or your digestive system is the thing, that gives you much more clarity. It's almost like learning a language with the manual that, someone talks to you in French and you pull out the French dictionary and you get to look up the words. Or, as I guess it is these days, you probably speak the words into Google Translate and it figures the whole thing out for you. Maybe that's what OHC should be building in time. But it's using that map to help you understand the different communications, and then to be able to prioritize those different communications that are happening. So if your emotions are saying you're frustrated, that you want to be able to go and do more, your physical body is saying that you need to rest, and your nervous system is saying that you're wired, perhaps you recognize the first thing is to rest, the second thing is to calm your nervous system, and then the third thing, a priority, is to figure out, in the limitations you have in that moment, what you can do, which is going to satisfy and calm some of that frustration and irritation. So to recap so far, recognizing it's a language, and there may be more than one language being spoken at once, that you need the dictionary or the kind of the map to help you decipher that language, and to be patient and gentle with yourself in the process of doing that. You also need to invest in the relationship with your body. So another element that can make this more tricky is it's not just as simple as a language being spoken by a kind of soulless and emotionless kind of robot. Your body is also sensitive, that if it needs your attention and you're being harsh and rejecting and frustrated, that will tend to inflame and further irritate what's happening there. And you have to build trust. You have to invest in the relationship with your body. And that is about being patient, about being gentle, about listening, about not forcing, about almost like being the loving, attentive, patient parent that a child needs to be able to develop in a healthy, functional way. And most of us didn't have. And most of us don't meet our own inner life. We meet it in the way that we were met as children. And often if that wasn't helpful, we meet ourselves in unhelpful ways. So also being aware of how you are being with and supporting the responses that you have. So for example, you go into crash and your symptoms flare. And rather than your reaction being one of being angry at your body and frustrated at it, being gentle, being compassionate, being patient. And that will actually help soothe and settle what's going on there. This piece of how we respond and react to symptoms, I think it's probably needs to be a separate video. It's just a whole other thing. Also here is things like bouncing the boundaries. Again, that's a separate video and a separate piece of the map. But when you listen to the body and you get the communications, the importance of gradually building and progressing what you're doing in such a way that you're not, again, talking at your body, but you're listening to your body. I'm mindful of the length of the video, and there's this is a big topic, and there's lots of nuance and pieces to this, and I don't want to overload too much at once. So what I think I might do is come some of these themes in separate pieces. Really, the main thing here is it's a language. You need to learn the language, or the languages, use the maps to do that. Be patient, meet it with a supportiveness and a gentleness that will encourage more communication and more openness. And as you move from meeting the world from only your head to your heart and your body and your experience, it gets easier. And it's a little bit like actually, the learning the language is a really useful analogy, because it's like you can work really hard at learning a language and then suddenly something clicks and you find yourself being able to hold a piece of dialogue. And often it almost comes spontaneously, that some of those experiences. So you put the work in and you can feel like there's not so much progress, then suddenly you notice that something that was hard is actually becoming much more effortless. So I hope that was useful. Just watching the comments. So Pamela says, I can watch myself crashing, learning language of my body, stopping when tired, not listening to others, just stopping. Yeah, so sometimes we just need to stop and be disciplined in the challenge of that. And yes, it is hard to change. It's harder not to change than it is to change very often. The suffering and the difficulty of staying where we are is often worse than changing. But in the short term, it takes clarity and consistency and habit to change the patterns. And thanks, Rachel, who says it's been really useful. So feel free to share your experiences with each other. And some of you, if you're not already in the Optimal Health Clinic Facebook group, so this page is more a place where we post content, and obviously you can comment and discuss underneath. But we have a Facebook group which is much more for you guys as a community to collaborate. So if you haven't joined that, do. We have had an influx of people trying to invade the group to promote things over the last 4 or 5 days or week or so, and I think we've got them all out now. And I think we're spotting them much more easily. There's a pattern of them coming in. So I think we're blocking 4 or 5 a day trying to come in. So, but do flag anyone that you see in the group, which is clearly just spamming and posting things. Please do flag them and we'll kick them out. So yeah, I hope that's been useful. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you either or an interview same time, sort of time next week. Bye-bye for now.